Jim Baker, the ex-FBI, now ex-Twitter employee. Some people are suspicious. People think maybe he deleted some evidence before he got the boot from Elon on his way out of Twitter. Now, yesterday, we spent a lot of time on this show talking about this release, this saga. The conversation was between Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and others. They dropped this as a supplemental to the Twitter files, and they said, holy moly, the person who's reviewing the evidence is actually Jim Baker. Why is that a problem? Well, Jim Baker is the person who we have questions about his actions. So it's like the person who is in trouble is investigating himself. It's insane. Now, to summarize this, we have a quick tweet. And Lee Fang on Twitter gave us this information. He says, Twitter's former top attorney, James Baker, who we covered at length here, was formerly an FBI attorney who passed on fake dirt from the Hillary campaign, right? We covered all of that. That was the Michael Sussman trial. That was Hillary Clinton colluding with Perkins Coie, which is where Michael Sussman worked. He was getting material from Fusion GPS and from Christopher Steele, the Steele dossier. All of that was given over to James Baker. He was at the FBI back then. And he was actually called as a witness in this trial. Michael Sussman was acquitted of all charges because DC is a corrupt jurisdiction, but they know that. That's why they play there. So he was involved in all of that. Now, all of this went over to Baker at the FBI. Baker didn't do anything about it. And they shoved that hoax down America's gullet. They alleged that a secret online portal between Russia's Alpha Bank to Trump, right? He was the basis of the whole collusion, the whole thing. So Eric Weinstein on Twitter says, I can't believe what I'm reading. So let's go slow. And to be honest, right, this was a pretty big shock when we heard this yesterday. We know about James Baker. We know about Michael Sussman. We know about Steele. We know about Twitter, all of the censorship. We were living it. I mean, we were literally streaming when all of this was going on. So we are not surprised by a lot of this. A lot of other people are shocked. They go, how the heck, what's all this censorship about? But we have been living it. But Weinstein, you know, I'm sure is up to speed. He's as shocked as we are on this. Everybody's shocked on this. He says, hold on a minute. The FBI's former attorney was hired by previous Twitter management, okay? And he was the one vetting the files that were given to Taibbi and Weiss that might reveal FBI collusion. And the new owner, Elon, wasn't told any of this? He says, what the heck? And Elon responded to that. He said, only discovered this on Sunday. All right, well, that's interesting. Kind of a pretty big problem. Right. It would be like if I was getting investigated by the state bar. They said, Rob, you committed a really big problem here. We think there's a conflict of interest. We think you might have done something wrong. We're going to have to look at your stuff. And I'd say, OK, that's fine. Why don't I come to your office and I get access to all of your computers and all of your materials, and I'll tell you exactly what you need of mine. And you can't, and I'll just give you what you need. Right. You have a lot of questions for me? Perfect. I'll give you exactly what you need, but you can't ask her anything else. And it's going to be perfectly honest. Trust me. It would be insane, right? That would never happen. So Elon says only discovered on Sunday. Now, my issue with this is not like a boneheaded mistake. James Baker is a lawyer. My understanding, he's a lecturer at Harvard, figures. And he's also somebody, former FBI general counsel, now Twitter general counsel. Lawyers are beat into their heads about conflict of interest. Okay, this is not like a joke. You have to, your law license is on the line. If you are being dishonest, if you are being somebody who is trying to play both sides, and you especially have like malicious intent, like a nefarious purpose to try to cover your own butts, that is even worse. Yes, we all know lawyers make mistakes. Lawyers, they don't pick up the phone. They're bad with this. They miss something, a court date, something happens, whatever, right? Everybody makes mistakes. The state bar, they have issue with that, and you get punished and go on probation or go do this sanction, whatever. But if you try to cover it up, if you screwed something up, you made a decision like this to censor free speech in America, and then in the middle of the investigation, you cover it up, that is a crime of dishonesty, right? That's an ethical violation of moral turpitude. That's a whole different category. And that's exactly what it looks like this guy did. Harvard professor, typical. All right, so that's what was going on Twitter, a big conversation back and forth between Musk evidently telling us that he only found out about this stuff on Sunday. Now, Dorsey is very anxious, right? Many people are anxious about this. They're going, holy moly. Elon's dripping this thing out like one day after another. They're all sitting around just fidgeting in their chairs, squirrely as can be, because they don't know what else is about to drop. And Jack is finally saying, right after Elon said, day 2 is coming out soon. And we haven't seen that yet. We just got the supplemental yesterday. Jack, the former CEO of Twitter, the guy who was basically in charge while a lot of this was going on, who could have shown everything to us, but who actually was there when they made the decision to boot Trump and to nuke all of the free speechers off the platform. Jack, very, interestingly says, oh, Elon, if the goal is transparency to build trust, why not just release everything without filter and let the people judge for themselves, including all the discussions around current and future actions? Make everything public now. Hashtag Twitter files. Okay. So Jack could have done that a long time ago. He didn't do any of that. And now he's mad at Elon, right? Jack could have done that any time before he left, and he didn't. But what is curious about this, and the thing that is a little bit disconcerting here, is Elon's response. All right, Jack can be, whatever Jack is. Who knows what he's doing these days. But Elon says in response to him, hey, Jack, guess what? Most important data was hidden, parentheses, from you too. And some may have been deleted. Ugh! But everything we find will be released. You see that right there? Man, that's not good. Most important data was hidden from me and from you and from the rest of us. And some may have been deleted. Some of that very important data. How'd that happen? But everything we find will be released. So we've got a big batch of stuff that may be gone now, right? We don't even know what the full universe of this stuff is, which is about what you would expect, right? If the disgusting den of censorship is about to be invaded, what do? You torch all your files, right? You open up the shredder, everything goes into the dumpster fire, and you just say, okay, well, no, there was nothing there. I have no idea. Basically what the January 6th Select Committee is going to do before the Republicans come in. Shred all the files. No, you didn't need any of that. And Elon, I guess, is either trying to reassemble it. Maybe he had no idea. He's just finding out about it. But everything we find is what he says will be released. So he's still promising to release what they've got, but we don't know what's there. So the full universe of the files is now at question. Some may have been deleted by whom? We would like to know. Was it Vijaya Gotti? Was it Jack himself? Or was it, as we all suspect, Jim Baker? Now, there's a concept that has been floating around on Twitter, and I don't want to improperly ascribe it to anybody or attribute it to anybody. But some people have been talking about this concept. It's a very interesting one. It's called a limited hangout. Now, we've brought this concept up before when we get very skeptical about drops and releases. And I'm not implying that this is what this is, right? I still think that I actually like the strategy of the drip. A lot of people don't like the strategy of the drip. But the drip strategy serves Elon as much as it serves, I think, consumption. Right? If this is one big story and we all go through it like in a weekend and, it sort of drips out, it's much easier for the media to forget about it. If you roll out a big fat meatball, they just got to ignore it for a couple weeks and then they move on. This drip strategy, it's, okay, every couple days, everybody's quivering in their boots. Jack's like, just release everything, please. Because he doesn't know what else is in there, right? Now, I'm sure everybody else feels that way too. You think Vijaya is out there, on a beach somewhere? No, she's probably a little bit nervous herself. So all of this is coming out, but people are asking, right, why is the drip looking like this? And why are certain things missing? Why don't we see more evidence of government involvement? In fact, one of the main critiques of Taibbi's original post on day one was that there was no real evidence of the FBI. It was just a bunch of Biden communicating with Twitter. Now, you and I know, because we've talked about it at length here, that there is an entire sort of alternative world where FBI's Elvis Chan is directly interfacing with a lot of the big tech platforms. And we found that from the deposition in Missouri and Louisiana versus the Bidens. So all of that's been going on. Now, I digress. Let's go back to this concept, okay? what is happening with Elon, right? Some people are suspecting, could it be a limited hangout? Like, is this really truth and honesty? Is this really full transparency? Or is this just kind of enough to kind of do the token release and then move on with this stuff? People are also asking about Elon's contracts. This is something we talked about this morning at our member live, where it was brought up. Elon's got a ton of government contracts, right? He's got to be highly intertwined with Starlink, and he's got to be invested with, all sorts of military officials and all this stuff, right? So, you're always asking where are the bounds, where are the limitations on truth and what is appropriate to be questioned and so on and so forth. And so this is a concept. Now, a limited hangout, or what's called a partial hangout, is a tactic used in media relations, perception management, politics, and information management. The tactic originated as a tactic in espionage trade, right? And actually, people were making the argument that this is what the Bidens were doing. Politicians do this all the time. Good argument that this is exactly what the Biden people were doing when they sort of acquiesced to Hunter's tax problem. Remember this story? Oh, he's under investigation from a U.S. attorney in Delaware, Andrew, whatever his name is, Weiss, I think. And he's investigating Hunter Biden for taxes. Oh, that's it? Just some taxes? He has a little bit of unreported income or something, right? Something pretty minor that he maybe gets charged for. They wrap it up with a plea deal. He pays a couple of $1 million that he embezzled from the Chinese a long time ago, and it all gets, thrown out. But then they get to turn around and say, oh, look, Hunter got prosecuted. Hunter was convicted. He's not above the law. There's no big, gigantic scheme to keep him protected. No, that's insane, right? It's limited because they want to give you a little bit to bite on without giving you the full meal. The concept came from a former special assistant at the CIA. They say it's spy jargon for a favorite and frequently used gimmick of the clandestine professionals. When their veil of secrecy is shredded and they can no longer rely on a phony cover story to misinform the public, they resort to admitting, yeah, that's right, sometimes even volunteering some of the truth while still be managing to withhold the key and damaging facts in the case. The public, however, is usually so intrigued by the new information it never thinks to pursue the matter further. Give them enough to make it go away. While used by the CIA and other intelligence organizations, the tactic has become popularized in corporate and political spheres. Here's an example of one. In March 23, a meeting between President Nixon and others, there was a new term incorporated called a modified limited hangout. Somebody said, President says, you think you want to go this route now and, let it hang out, so to speak, just kind of let it hang out. Dean says, well, it isn't really that. Haldeman said, it's a limited hangout. Yeah, Dean says, yeah, it's a limited hangout. It's a modified limited hangout. President says, well, it's only the questions of the thing hanging out publicly or privately. All right, that's what's going on in the White House. That was the conversation between Nixon, John Dean, John Ehrlichman, and John Mitchell. Bunch of bros talking about letting it hang out, probably in the Oval Office, which is just perfect. And so this discussion captures Nixon outlining to Dean the content of the report that they would create, laying out a misleading view of the White House's role. The report says, right, so you give enough information, it's essentially misinformation or it's incomplete information. So that's the background, right? There's people who are talking about that, but like I said, don't want to misattribute it to anybody. That being said, let's listen to Miranda Devine. Miranda Devine is on Twitter at Miranda Devine. Definitely worth a follow if you're interested in this stuff. And of course you are, everybody is. Miranda is being asked by Tucker about her take on this. Now that some of this stuff is revealed. Okay, many people, Miranda, Garrett Ziegler, we have Julie Kelly, others have been doing work on this story for years now. And it hasn't really gotten attention until Elon dropped 44 billion buckaroos, bought the company and made it all public. Now they've got some spotlights, right? Literally, we talk about the big, beautiful spotlight. There's one on it now, thanks to Elon's 20 million followers. So Miranda, what are you seeing and how does it fit with what you know to be true?
Miranda, thank you so much for coming on. What do you make of this?
Hi, Tucker. Well, look, as you and I discussed on Friday night, it was pretty obvious that the Twitter files that had just been released were missing a crucial element, and that was the FBI. So, we surmised that somehow Elon Musk had redacted it or someone had withheld the information about the FBI's
May I ask you to pause right there, Amanda?
pre-bunking.
Miranda, you were the only person who said that, actually. It wasn't me, it was you. You were the first person. You took a look at those documents and you said, someone has taken out the incriminating stuff. And I think you were the only person to catch that. So I just think you deserve credit for it.
Thanks. Well, so the FBI, we knew, had pre-bunked to the social media platforms our story. Before it came out, they told them to expect a pile of Russian disinformation, and Twitter was told by the FBI, we know from Yoel Roth, to expect that it would be in October and would probably refer to Hunter Biden. So we knew that there had to be something about that at Twitter, and yet there wasn't in the Twitter files. And it was pretty obvious who was suppressing that information, who was the person with the biggest motive. It was Twitter's top lawyer, James Baker, who, as you just said, had been the top lawyer at the FBI, the quarterback of the FBI Russia collusion scandal. And he had to leave the FBI because of that. And lo and behold, he shows up at Twitter 5 months before the 2020 election. And lo and behold,
very convenient.
One little element did come out in the Twitter files Friday night. It was this one email that had the date and time removed from it very peculiarly.
All right. And I want to show you that email just so that we have it for full context. This was entry number 28 from Matt Taibbi. And he said here, this is when former Deputy General Counsel Jim Baker, again, seems to advise staying the non-course because he says caution is warranted. Right. And this is from a set of emails where they're having debates about what to do. Should we censor the Hunter Biden story? Should we keep, Kayleigh McEnany nuked? What about James Wood? Should he stay nuked? We have this new policy we're trying to create on the fly. What do we do? So Baker responded and he said the following. He said, I support the conclusion that we need more facts to assess the materials were hacked. Blow this up a little bit. He says, however, it's reasonable for us to assume that they may have been hacked and that the caution is warranted. He says there are some facts that indicate that the materials may have been hacked, while there are others indicating that the computer was either abandoned, that the owner consented to allow the repair shop to access it for at least some purposes. He says we simply need more information. Now, this is kind of hysterical, obviously, because the laptop had already been in possession of the FBI at this time. They already had it by the time all of this was happening. So presumably, Jim, if he had any contacts over there, he is an ex-FBI person. He should be able to validate whether it's true or not. FBI thought it was true enough to hang on to it for whatever reason. They didn't tell him about it. They didn't tell him about any of this stuff when he was meeting with Michael Sussman, when they were trying to do any collusion stuff. Oh, actually, that was many years before. But you get the picture, right? He's in the same circle. Now, on this, as we're going to hear from Miranda, there's nothing else on this. This is just a paragraph, right? This is just a big block of text. So why is that? Why are we not seeing, headers, emails to and from, date, timestamps, all sorts of other things? Because in some of the other releases, we have that. Actually, not on that one, but here, right? Here's another one where we have a little bit more details. Now, what looks like is happening is Taibbi is just, summarizing the notes. He's sort of like typing a Word document of everything that he's seeing. I sort of envision, everything like spread out across a table, thousands of pages of Twitter censorship materials. And he's just going through it and sort of typing his notes. Okay, 2020, 1014, NY Post, Hunter Biden laptop article, boom, privileged and confidential. He's writing the notes and he's going through another email. He says, this is garbage. This one's garbage. All right, nothing in this one, nothing here. And he's just summarizing everything. And then he's publishing literal screenshots from that for all of us. But we get more detail on some of this stuff, like copy, CC, Yoel, Roth, R. Summers. We get some dates, 10/14, 2020. On another one, there's a little bit more details here. This actually looks like it might be a screenshot from an actual email. Okay, you see that one there. Elaine Ong Sato, ops analyst, global escalations team. Hi, Carolyn. Looks like an actual screenshot from an email. Whereas the other one just looks like a summary, like literally a summary. And so people are saying, well, that's weird. Like, why is that? Is Jim Baker in there, taken out? Is he whiting out the emails? Is Jim Baker nuking the timestamps? What's going on? So let's go back now to Miss Devine.
But it was from James Baker, and it was weighing in on the decision on the morning of October 14, 2020, a few hours after our story came out. And there was James Baker weighing in on the side of censorship.
Right.
No surprise.
Amazing. And as you said at the very outset, this is not just a story about free speech on social media. This is a story about the corruption of the FBI, federal law enforcement. And you were absolutely right. Miranda Devine, vindicated once again.
And Tucker, look, Elon Musk needs to let all the information out. Let us all see it. No more of this curating and holding back.
No, it's ridiculous. I appreciate it.
Tucker Carlson. No, it's ridiculous. Thanks for coming on, Miranda. All right. So interesting stuff. Now we are going to check in with the White House. The White House, of course, they've had 2 days now, several days to comment on this. And we'll see what our friend Karine Jean-Pierre has to say for us. Right after we talk about our friends over at 4patriots.com. You know, there's a story about a tree branch. It hit a power line in Ohio in 2003, and it shut down, a single tree branch shut down 21 power plants. Around 100 people died. Now, we have a power grid, as you know, that was designed in the 1800s. Even the White House sees it. They're saying 2/3 of the grid are at least 25 years old. So they recently announced billions of dollars, of course, to update it. And how long will that take, and what will it actually do? Who knows? That's why having your own solar power supply is more important than ever. With a Patriot Power Generator, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. Look at this. You can take it with you, even use it inside. It's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, or even your fridge. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use code Robert to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including this Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on anything over $97. A portion of every sale from 4Patriots is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. You can go to 4patriots.com, use code Robert to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com, and use code Robert to start building your supplies today. All right, and now it is time to check in with the White House because they've been very quiet on this for a long time. Karine Jean-Pierre takes the podium and is asked a question. Hey, Karine, it's been several days now since the Twitter files have dropped. Is the White House going to answer any questions about this? We tried to get some answers from you yesterday. Got nothing. Let me try again. Karine, what do you have for us?
One more on Twitter, Karine. The Twitter files have released that the company typically required an official or law enforcement finding that materials were hacked in order to exercise their company policy to restrict certain stories or reporting. And the journalist who released the material noted that in this case, around the Hunter Biden laptop story, there was no official or law enforcement finding that appeared in the material that he was given. So my question to you is, did anyone from the Biden team communicate to Twitter that this material was from or this reporting stemmed from hacked materials?
Are you talking about the campaign?
It would have been the campaign or anyone around the family. Just wondering because in the Twitter files release and what Matt Taibbi said, he noted that typically the company would require a law enforcement or official finding that something was hacked in order to exercise their hacked materials clause, and that he didn't see that in what had been given to him. So wondering if it was communicated even informally by someone around the president or the president's family or the campaign that this was hacked material or could have come from hacked material, given that there was so much concern, especially after the 2018 foreign interference situation, that could be something that we would see in that election. So I'm wondering if there was that communication there surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop story.
So I can't speak to decisions made by the campaign from here. That is not. It is a political campaign, so I can't speak from here. I'm covered by the Hatch Act, and so I'm just not going to comment on the question that you're asking me. But what I can say more broadly is, of course, it's up to these companies to make their own decision about the content on their platforms and to ensure content follows their own standards and policies. But I'm just not going to comment on a decision that was made during the campaign.
Yeah, can't comment on that because it's kind of a bad revelation if she has to admit it. They knew that the Hunter Biden laptop was real. They knew it wasn't hacked material. They knew that it was abandoned property that had been properly lost and was newsworthy, but they censored it anyways, and she doesn't want to talk about it, obviously. So the White House is just not going to comment on it, right? This is the Barry strategy, which is not a bad strategy, which is exactly why Elon needs to keep talking about it and to keep dripping this stuff day in and day out, because the White House is just going to continue to ignore. And we'll see how far it goes, right? We'll see what other drops Elon, Matt, and Barry have in store for us. But let's see what the Republicans have to say. The White House is going to stay quiet about it. The Republicans are not. Jim Jordan says that this is pure censorship from the Biden administration. And he says when the Republicans are in charge, they're going after it hard.
Yeah, well, even last weekend, I guess he's still looking at the emails that are going to Taibbi and that are going out to the public. So talk about the fox watching the hen house here. I mean, come on. So remember, this guy was the chief counsel at the FBI 2016, 2017, when they were spying on President Trump's campaign and President Trump. And then, of course, he goes to Twitter and he's the counsel who's making the decision. Oh, it's reasonable to assume that the Hunter Biden story, just days before the most important election we have, it's reasonable to
Very
assume,
convenient.
he said, that that's a hack and leak operation from the Russians, and which we knew wasn't. And then, of course, now he's
Yeah, the FBI had the hard drive over there.
doing this over last week, and then, of course, he was fired yesterday. So this just shows big tech, big media, big government working together to keep information from we the people. That's the problem. And what I'm committed to doing, what the members of the Republican members on the judiciary are committed to do, is get into the FBI's role in all this, those weekly briefings they were doing with big tech on the heels of that letter from 51 former intel officials that said it was a Russian disinformation operation. Baloney. They knew it was baloney, and yet they were doing these briefings. So that's the big problem.
So, right, Stephen Chen was the FBI agent, literally, weekly meetings. This was confirmed by Twitter. Yoel Roth was the individual who said, yeah, in his declaration responding to an RNC complaint that was brought over censorship, said, yeah, we have weekly meetings with the FBI. That was before the election even took place, right? They were censoring and colluding. The government was colluding with big tech before the election to censor political enemies. Yeah. And Jordan says that the Republicans are going to go after it. Now, we've got another clip here from James Comer. He says that they have already jumped in on this. Of course, Elon's Twitter files dropped. And what's the next step? What are the Republicans going to do? James Comer says they're not waiting around. Elon released the goods. There's names in them Twitter files. And Comer said, I've already sent the letters out.
The Twitter files, I think, have shifted, was working to push this election in Biden's favor and get this story off social media, not just Twitter, but Facebook as well. What does that mean for your investigation come January?
Bottom line, these are more lies by Joe Biden. Go back to the debate when he squarely denied that laptop was Hunter Biden's. He continued to lie by having his campaign and the Democratic National Committee demand to social media companies, both Twitter and Facebook, that this was Russian disinformation. I mean, that's a big lie. Now, we have to ask ourselves, why is he so concerned about the laptop?
He lied directly. Okay, and he referenced that letter from the 51 so-called intelligence officials. He could have asked his son. He could have just picked up the phone and called Hunter and said, hey, Hunter, is your laptop, is this story real? What is this? But he didn't do it. Instead, he referred this over to 51 intelligence officials. What kind of a parent would do that?
The answer is because the laptop proves even more lies spoken by Joe Biden, especially when it comes to not just his knowledge of what his family's shady business dealings were, but his involvement. And the most concerning thing to me over all the laptop, and this is a long list of potential crimes by his family, the most concerning thing is where they were, when I say they, I'm talking Hunter and Joe, were working with the CCP to try to get China's foot in the door on the American energy industry. And that's something that should concern every American.
It does.
This is something that Joe Biden continues to lie about. The media continues to try to cover up. But thanks to Elon Musk, we're going to find more and more information out about not just what the Biden campaign did to suppress bad stories about his family's influence peddling, but also what the Biden administration and the FBI did to suppress stories about the Biden influence peddling.
Yeah.
And if you go back and listen to Garrett Ziegler on this channel talking about that, we got into the entire saga about Hunter and the mineral rights that they were fighting over in, I think, Congo in Africa. It was a wild conversation. All of them were involved in it, in collusion, cahoots with the Chinese. And Ziegler and Marco Polo, the nonprofit over there, dug through the whole thing. Make sure you're giving them a follow. But Comer also says, we're not waiting on this thing. We've already jumped and started sending letters to people named in the Twitter thread.
Upset. I'm sure to some extent he feels vindicated to know that, yes, this actually did happen. We remember what CBS News and 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl basically laughed in the sitting president's face back in 2020. He's reacting the way I think anybody would react. And let's not forget, Congressman, this was all happening behind the scenes. Tell us what happens starting in early January when you formally take over control of the House.
Get it.
Well, we've already sent letters to the 3 Twitter executives mentioned in the Twitter files dump that Elon Musk has orchestrated. There are going to be more files that Elon Musk is going to drop before January. But we wanted to get notice out to the 3 Twitter employees. They're going to come forward. We've been communicating. In fact, I had a very high-level meeting yesterday with the bank CEO about how we're going to obtain the bank records. And it's not just the suspicious activity reports that I've been talking about. It's also some bank records, because we have, according to interviews we've conducted and according to the text messages and emails, we have specific areas where we believe that Hunter Biden was paying for daily living expenses for Joe Biden, significant amounts of money. So we have a pretty clear focus where we're going with these bank records. And that's what we're going to do on day one.
So it sounds like they've got records of Hunter Biden paying for Joe Biden's bills, right? And that's how the money's laundered, right? He doesn't actually pay Joe Biden, like write a check. Hey, great job. 10% for the big guy. Big guy's Joe. He doesn't say that. No, he just says, well, we'll just kind of, buy all that crap for you on Hunter's credit card. So that's Comer. Now, we've also got a clip from Ron Johnson, and he is right about this. Senator Johnson astutely observes that this is not just about Twitter, where there is one, there are probably more. And it is very likely that this censorship extends beyond Twitter into Facebook, Google, YouTube, every other stinking platform out there.
Well, again, and everybody was sabotaging the disclosure of Hunter Biden's corruption that would compromise a future president of the United States. And so he got elected. We've seen polls that said he wouldn't have been elected if this story had been known, if people had known this. And so there are a lot of people involved in this. It wasn't just Twitter. It was Democrats in Congress. It was the FBI. It was members of the intelligence community. There's a much larger story here than just the Twitter file.
Bigger story indeed. They were all involved. And it's, again, not just the big tech platforms. It's the FBI. It's the collusion. It's a bunch of people in there who are working together in cahoots to try to shut all of this up. Now, I wanted to share with you some stuff that's happening legally speaking. We've got a petition that made its way over to the United States Supreme Court that was granted, which means the Supreme Court is actually going to hear about this. And if you go over to the docket at the United States Supreme Court, you'll see that this was docketed some time ago, back in April. This is the case of Reynaldo Gonzalez versus Google, LLC. The petition was filed back in April. Motion to extend times, bunch of stuff was it took a while to get here. But then the petition was granted back in October, and we're starting to see a bunch of documents now filed, right? We're getting ready for oral arguments. All of these amicus briefs are filing in. State of Tennessee. We've got Josh Hawley. We're going to take a look at his. And these are briefs. These are friends of the court briefs, right? Tons of stuff. We've got American Association for Justice, amicus brief of Tawana Anderson. She's an individual and she's an executor of an estate. Center for Renewing America. Former national security officials submitted this. Free Press Action submitted a brief. National Center on Exploitation, right? Look at all of these people. The great state of Texas submitted a brief. Ted Cruz submitted a brief. Cyber Civil Rights and Seattle School District submitted a brief, right? It's out of control. All right, so let's take a look at what this case is about. Obviously, people are very interested. This is a petition for a writ of certiorari submitted into the United States Supreme Court. Case is Reynaldo versus Google. And the question presented is about Section 230, We're talking about Twitter censoring. We're talking about Facebook censoring. A lot of people are asking about the law and what can be done about this. Hawley, Cruz, Texas, many others are diving in. The question at the Supreme Court is about Section 203(c)(1). This is the act that immunizes all of big tech, Google, YouTube, and others. This appeal is up on a recent appeal. 3 different cases are sort of landing at the Supreme Court at the same time. Now, the question, the big important question about Section 230 is, does Section 230 immunize online services when they make targeted recommendations of information provided by another information content provider, or does it only limit the liability of those online platforms when they engage in traditional editorial functions like deciding whether to display or withdraw with regard to the information? Okay, so let's break that down. There are 2 things that are happening on these platforms. One, let's say Twitter, for example, to just make it simple for explanation purposes, they're a content provider. Now, if they allow certain things on or off the platform, people argue that they are becoming editors, right? That they are editorializing. They're not like the telephone anymore. The telephone, you just pick it up, you can call. Nobody's censoring or saying what you can say on the telephone. It's just a conveyance. When the big tech platforms, when they start putting roadblocks up, are they now acting as editors? And if they are acting as editors, are they immune? Now, we're asking specifically about just recommendations, okay? Because they don't have to necessarily delete anything. They can just adjust the algorithms. And so the parties here are different estates. They're all suing Google, several directly related cases. Fast forwarding through the petition, you can see that there are opinions they're giving us details about, and they give us some history. Now, here's the statement of the case. Actually, we're going to skip all of this. Let's go over to Hawley's explanation, because I also thought I had that. So Hawley submitted a brief, and I've got to open this up here. For some reason, it's not open. One second. We're adjusting on the fly here. And let's get our red pen out so that we can mark this puppy up. This is what it looks like. Amicus brief from Senator Josh Hawley opining on Section 230. This landed in the United States Supreme Court as a friend of the court brief. Hawley says, all right, Supreme Court judges. He says, as a member of the U.S. Senate and a former state government official with a long record of engagement on technology, we've got a pretty strong interest in Section 230 and upholding expansive liability. If this court does not correct the mistaken history of this law, policymakers will continue to face challenges in their Article 1 obligations to promote regulation of these channels. We urge the court to reverse the decision of the Court of Appeals and interpret Section 230 in a manner consistent with the law. This says that Section 230 shielded online liability at some point. It does not abolish other types of liability. Let's see what Hawley's conclusion is. The point of showing you this, I don't want to get into all the details of Section 230. It's sort of complicated stuff, and we've got a whole nother segment to get to. But let's see what he's saying down here. All right, so that's that. All right, if you want to read the full brief, I don't want to get into all the Section 230 stuff because it's heavy lifting. But the point is, right, all of these petitions are at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is going to weigh in. We're going to hear more about that. Once they're scheduled for oral arguments, we'll dive into that a little bit more. But the courts are also in on this, okay? So the Republicans are investigating this in Congress. And at the Supreme Court, they're also considering what to do about Section 230 there as well. Hawley is commenting on this. He explains what he's trying to do.
They're doing it by coercing private companies to do it. And you're exactly right, Tucker. And by the way, the Supreme Court has been clear on this. The Supreme Court has said the U.S. government cannot go to private actors and coerce them to do things that the government couldn't do on its own under the Constitution. But Tucker, that is exactly what the Biden administration has been doing. They've been pressuring private companies and really colluding with them to censor domestic speech, to censor American citizens' political speech on everything from COVID to mask mandates to CRT to the war in Ukraine. All of it, Biden has been trying to control through the government.
Right. And they are filing a bunch of briefs. The Supreme Court is going to listen to this. We're going to talk about, immunity for these tech platforms if they are literally trying to manipulate speech, right? With the algorithms, with the recommendation engine, promote somebody, demote somebody. Is that censorship? They're going to figure that out in the United States Supreme Court, and we'll, of course, continue to cover it. We'll also wait and see if Elon has any updates for us. All right, my friends, so that's it from Jim Baker, the man who very maybe could have possibly deleted some files before he got thrown out of there. We'll continue to cover. Thank you for following along as we do, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.